Well, welcome back to history class. Too bad we can't do this in person, but hopefully we can get by with these videos for now. In this video, we're going to talk about Operation Market Garden. Operation Market Garden was a plan put forward by the British, in particular the British General Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery, as a way to hopefully shorten the war, and at the time it was actually hoped that this would allow the Allies to defeat Germany before the end of 1944. Now, as it turns out, it didn't happen that way, and we'll explain more about why that was. But the British plan was very ambitious. It involved an extensive use of airborne units, an armored push into the Netherlands. Now, the American generals were skeptical of the British plan, but they wanted to continue to work cooperatively with the British, and they kind of went along with the British plan. And then when it failed to bring about the results they wanted, it kind of was always regarded as, don't necessarily do everything the British tell you to do. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. There were some people who were even suspicious about Montgomery using this as a way to bring himself glory, although in the end it didn't end up working the way he wanted to. So, as we go into some of the units and some of the actions, we'll get to see one of the most important theaters of the war, one of the ways in which the Allies were trying to bring a decisive end to the war as quickly as possible, and therefore eliminate as many casualties as possible, and hopefully see how this had a way of shaping the war as it went on. All right, so this operation comes a little bit after D-Day. So D-Day was June in 1944. Now we're up to mid-September of 1944. By this time, the Allies have done a really good job of securing France and are looking for a way into Germany. Now, just like the Germans had gone through Belgium, kind of coming into France from the north, the Allies are looking maybe to a little bit copy that, going north into Belgium and then into the Netherlands as a way to loop around the Siegfried Line, which you can see right here, a defended position, and enter what the Germans called the Ruhrgebiet, which was an important industrial heart of Germany. And the idea was, if you can knock this out, Germany basically doesn't have the ability to wage war in the future. The idea was to be able to push very quickly through the Netherlands, getting some of these towns at Nijmegen, Arnhem, and then hook around and make that strike into the heart of Germany. Now, the challenge has to do with how many rivers are going to be blocking the way. The Germans control these points and are going to destroy bridges if they think that the Allies would use them. So the idea for the Allies is they have to capture those bridges, secure them, so that an armored force can punch up through and complete the mission. So a significant challenge. As I said earlier, the plan was hatched by the top British general, Montgomery, who had already become famous for defeating the Germans in North Africa. He had participated in the fighting in Italy and had actually become a major rival to the famous American general George Patton. So a very strong personality, and this was something he pushed very hard for the Allies to do. So that's a famous picture of him in a tank. He had a strong sense of planning. He was very meticulous in his preparation, often criticized for being a little bit too slow or not aggressive enough, but very, very cautious. I think his men appreciated how cautious he was, since it probably saved a lot of their lives. So Market Garden involved the largest airborne operation in history, and it's not really close. There's never been anything this large since. It involved 14,589 men landed in gliders, so not just jumping out with a parachute on, but they actually towed these gliders behind transport planes. And then, of course, 20,000 soldiers who landed by parachute, as you can see pictured here. So there were over 34,000 landed in total, as well as almost 2,000 vehicles. Now, we're not talking heavy tanks things like jeeps primarily, as well as quite a few pieces of artillery. Again, lighter pieces of artillery, but you know, if you want to have a substantial force capable of being self-sustaining for a while, you're going to need some of this equipment. The vehicles would be useful for towing that artillery, small pieces of artillery towed by jeeps. Finally, there needed to be over 3,000 tons of ammunition and supplies. Again, the paratroopers were designed to land behind enemy lines, so they were effectively cut off and surrounded while they fight, and they would complete their mission and then link up with the rest of the ground forces if their plan worked out. So the British brought in their 1st Airborne Division, known as the Red Devils, because of the red berets that they wore into battle. Apparently, these soldiers were so proud of their unit and proud of their red caps that they would actually avoid wearing helmets if possible. I think the term actually came from a comment Germans made about these red British devils, something like that. So they were feared by the Germans, very highly trained, and would fight very, very hard. The American 101st Airborne Division participated in this battle. I believe this unit still exists, but it became really famous. They were known as the Screaming Eagles, after the eagle insignia they wore on their arms. If you've ever seen the miniseries Band of Brothers, you can see some of the stuff involved with American paratroopers, both in the D-Day invasion as well as in Operation Market Garden. The 101st Airborne guys like to paint their faces like Indians and even use the Mohawk haircut resembling the Mohawk Indians. So they were very fierce in battle, extremely determined. Finally, another showing from expatriate Poles. So General Stanislaw Franceschi Sosabowski, I'm not sure if I said that right, led the first independent parachute brigade of Polish guys who had been able to get out of Poland when Poland was invaded by the Germans, and they had worked with the British military to form their own parachute brigade, and they actually fought very hard in this battle and gained a lot of respect. So this is an image of just how dense the parachute drops were. People who are eyewitnesses seeing the air armada take off from Britain and fly over describe horizon to horizon aircraft, and the sound was incredible. The amount of noise that many aircraft made was just awe-inspiring and terrifying for the Germans who saw it. So the parachute drops and the glider drops were quite extensive. You can see in this picture several gliders have already landed on the ground. Those ones look like they've landed safely. Sometimes they crash landed, and there was actually a lot of risk involved, both for the guys with parachutes and the guys landing in gliders. For the ground forces, the armor spearhead that was supposed to link up with the parachute forces was the 30th Corps, commanded by Lieutenant General Sir Brian Gwyn Horrocks. Their emblem there has that boar. This is a photograph of one of their pieces of equipment. I think we talked earlier about how much cooperation there was between the Allies and especially Britain and the United States. So this is an American-made tank chassis fitted with a British 17-pounder gun. It was a very effective combination used in Operation Market Garden and other battles. This was one of the few Allied vehicles that had a chance to knock out some of the late war heavy German tanks. The German forces were largely controlled by Field Marshal Walter Model. He had a lot of background fighting the Soviets on the Eastern Front, where he had been sent into some of the trickiest situations to shore up flagging defenses. He was known as the Führer's fireman. He would come and put out fires, as it were. So he was really, really skilled at taking a losing situation and creating an effective defense. So creative defense was kind of what he was most known for. And in this battle, he proved effective again in being able to hold off some of a lot of the Allied invasions. One of the major German units here was the 2nd SS Panzer Division, which proved very effective. That's one of those heavier German tanks. That's a Panther tank in this case, and the Allies were encountering these, and especially the paratroopers sometimes were encountering heavy armor with jeeps and not much more. So it was very challenging for them. You can see why this would have been difficult. Alright, so in this video here, we're going to get a nice overview of how the battle progressed. And you can kind of see some of the challenges faced by the Allies trying to pull this off.
After major defeats in Normandy in the summer of 1944, remnants of German forces withdrew across eastern France and Belgium towards the German border by the end of August. As the Allied pursuit across France and Belgium continued, distances increased beyond the range of a single truck. Offensive operations slowed to a standstill, allowing the German forces to fall back and regroup. The British proposed Operation Market Garden, an ambitious plan to bypass the Siegfried Line by hooking around its northern end, allowing the Allies to cross the Rhine. The plan consisted of two operations, Market and Garden. Market would deploy 3 airborne divisions to capture the bridges over the Meuse, Wall, and Rhine rivers, together with crossings over several smaller channels. Garden consisted of the British 30th Corps, which would lead the ground offensive linking up the bridges. If successful, 30th Corps, together with the airborne forces, would break out of the Arnhem bridgehead and head east towards Germany and its most important industrial area, the Ruhr Valley. The operation started on Sunday, September 17, 1944, when 2,000 transport airplanes lift off from airfields in England. On board are 3 divisions totaling 20,000 men. The American 101st Airborne Division lands north of Eindhoven with the objective of capturing 5 bridges. After a brief delay caused by an 88mm gun and a machine gun post, the bridge at Sun was blown up by the Germans on approach. The other bridges are successfully captured. The American 82nd Airborne Division is dropped in the Nijmegen area. Their goal is to capture the bridges over Meuse, Wall, and the canal linking the 2 rivers. The bridge over the Meuse is successfully captured, and so are the crossings over the canal. The attack on the Wall bridge failed, leaving the bridge in German hands. To the west of Arnhem, forces of the British 1st Airborne Division landed without serious incident, but problems associated with the poor plan began soon after. Only half of the division arrived with the first lift, and only half of these could advance on the bridge. The remaining troops had to defend the drop zones overnight for the arrival of the second lift on the following day. 2 of the 3 battalions of the 1st Parachute Brigade were slowed down by small German units of a training battalion, which had quickly established a thin blocking line covering the obvious routes into Arnhem. Lieutenant Colonel John Frost, 2nd Parachute Battalion, advancing eastwards along the southernmost road into Arnhem near the Rhine, found its route largely undefended. They arrived at the bridge in the evening and set up defensive positions at the north end. In the south, 300 guns of the Corps artillery opened fire, firing a rolling barrage in front of 30th Corps start line. The advance was led by tanks and infantry of the Irish Guards. The lead units broke out of 30th Corps bridgehead on the Meuse-Escaut Canal and crossed into the Netherlands. Around noon on Monday, September 18th, the 101st Airborne were met by the lead reconnaissance units from 30th Corps. Radio contact alerted the main force that the Sun Bridge had been destroyed and requested that a Bailey Bridge be brought forward. During the night, 30th Corps engineers constructed a Bailey Bridge within 10 hours across the Wilhelmina Canal. By the end of the day, the 1st and 3rd Parachute Battalions had entered Arnhem and were within 2 kilometers, 1.2 miles of the bridge with approximately 200 men, 1/6 of their original strength. During the early morning hours of the 3rd day, September 19th, the 1st Parachute Brigade, supported by remnants of the 3rd Battalion, began its attack towards Arnhem Bridge. As soon as it became light, the 1st Battalion was spotted and halted by fire from a German defensive position. With no hope of breaking through, the 500 remaining men withdrew westwards in the direction of the main force 5 kilometers 3.1 miles away near the landing zone. Units of the 82nd Division made contact with the Grenadier Guards of the 30th Corps at Grave. By the afternoon of 20 September, the British positions around the north end of Arnhem Bridge had weakened considerably. Casualties, mostly wounded, were high from constant shelling. An acute lack of ammunition, especially anti-tank munitions, enabled enemy armor to demolish British positions from point-blank range. Food, water, and medical supplies were scarce. The Germans overcame pockets of resistance throughout the day, gaining control of the northern bridge approaches and permitting reinforcements to cross the span and reinforce units further south near Nijmegen. The last radio message broadcasted from the bridge: "Out of ammo, God save the King." Boats requested by the 82nd Airborne from 30th Corps arrived in the afternoon. The American paratroopers were rowed across the wall in 26 canvas assault boats. About half the boats survived the crossing under heavy fire. The surviving paratroopers then proceeded, fighting to the north end of the bridge. German forces withdrew from both ends of the bridge after the 30th Corps Guards tanks secured the bridge. On 21st September, the 5th day of the operation, approximately 3,500 survivors of the 1st Airborne Division established themselves in the buildings and woods around Oysterbeek with the intention of holding a bridgehead on the north side of the Rhine until 30th Corps could arrive. Throughout the day, their position was heavily attacked on all sides. That same day, after 2 days of delay due to the weather, the Polish 1st Independent Parachute Brigade entered the battle. 2 of the brigade's 3 battalions were dropped amidst heavy German fire, opposite the 1st Airborne Division's position on a new drop zone south of the Rhine near the village of Dreil. The 3rd Battalion was dropped 12 to 15 miles away near Grave. The following 3 days, the Germans attacked the British positions on the north side of the river and the Polish on the south side. On Monday, September 25, the 9th day of battle, the 1st Airborne Division received their orders to withdraw across the Rhine. This could not be done until nightfall, and in the meantime the division struggled to survive. By the next morning, they had withdrawn 2,398 survivors. Of approximately 10,600 men of the 1st Airborne Division who fought north of the Rhine, 1,485 had died. The prized Arnhem Bridge, for which the British had fought so hard, did not survive the war. Allied B-26 bombers aircraft destroyed it on 7 October to deny its use to the Germans. It was replaced with a bridge of similar appearance in 1948 and renamed John Frost Bridge on 17 December 1977.
All right, so that gives a kind of a nice overview of how the battle went and how close the Allied forces got to obtaining their objectives. Again, the difficulty of using parachute troops or glider-based troops in that sort of cut-off position can be very difficult. The weather did not always cooperate. That's another variable. Now, this Operation Market Garden formed the basis for a really interesting book called A Bridge Too Far, written by Cornelius Ryan, which I can highly recommend. And if you've got some time to kill and want to watch a World War II classic, the movie based on that book, based on this theater of the war, A Bridge Too Far, is really quite a fun watch. It's got a star-studded cast, including Sean Connery, Robert Redford, and many others. It's like close to 3 hours long, if I remember correctly, but a really fun World War II movie, and if you're looking for stuff to do at home, I can intrigue you with this trailer.
We've paid for that bridge and we're going to collect.
We're going to fly 35,000 men 300 miles and drop them behind enemy lines. It'll be the largest airborne operation ever mounted. Quite frankly, this kind of thing's never been attempted before. We We shall seize the bridges, it's all a question of bridges, with thunderclap surprise, and hold them until they can be secured. And we go next Sunday.
7 days.
The sooner we go, the better. We've got them on the run.
Joseph E. Levine presents A Bridge Too Far. Based on Cornelius Ryan's international bestseller. The story of the most dramatic and devastating battle of World War II.
The plan is called Operation Market Garden. Market is the airborne element, and Garden the ground forces. I like to think of this as one of those American Western films. Germans will naturally, they're the bad guys. We, my friends, are the cavalry on the way to the rescue.
A Bridge Too Far. Starring Dirk Bogarde, James Caan, Michael Caine, Sean Connery, Edward Fox, Elliot Gould, Gene Hackman, Anthony Hopkins, Hardy Kruger, Laurence Olivier, Ryan O'Neal, Robert Redford, Maximilian Schell, Liv Ullmann.
Take cover!
Don't you think that since we know that Arnhem is so crucial to their safety, they might know that too?
The river's wide and that the current is strong. Hail Mary, full of grace. If there's any more cheery information comes my way, I'll just be too happy to pass it along. In the meantime, just think of this as on-the-job training. You're 36 hours behind schedule.
There's a battle, and we are in the process of winning it.
Winning and losing is not a concern. Living or dying is.
Colonel, if you don't look at him right now, he's gonna die.
Dead now.
Right now.
I can give him a quick examination, can I?
Thank you very much, sir.
We need reinforcements and, above all, ammunition.
Little General, we're coming. We're coming tonight.
2 days, they said. We've been here 9.
Why didn't we just try to bash through?
Well, as you'll know, I've always thought that we tried to go a bridge too far.
All right, so well worth a watch if you're looking for a fun war movie. It's, as I said, probably something like 3 hours long, but got a lot of really cool actors involved. So, Operation Market Garden, officially, or at least technically, a failure. However, it's often regarded as one of the most outstanding showings for American and British and Polish forces. If you hear the stories of what some of the soldiers in the battle were able to accomplish, how long those paratroopers held off, even when they were cut off and surrounded, couldn't get resupplied because of bad weather and the delays preventing the armor from reaching them. Just really outstanding fighting. The Germans had a lot of respect for the airborne units, especially after this battle. But it did have some consequences as far as meaning the war would end a little bit later, about a full year later. Now, one of the reasons that this really matters is that if the Allies do not take Germany quickly, it gives more time for the Soviet Union and for Stalin to come in from the other side of Germany, coming from the other direction, to come in and take over more of Germany. In fact, as we'll see, Stalin's forces end up capturing Berlin instead of either the Americans or the British. So this actually has very serious consequences for the fate of Germany. Ironically, it probably would have been much better for Germany as a country had they lost the fighting in the Netherlands during Operation Market Garden. But as it turns out, they were able to withstand that invasion attempt and ended up losing their capital to the Russians, which led to Germany being partitioned between the Soviet Union and Western democracy. So we'll go into more of that later on. But for now, that'll do it for Operation Market Garden.